Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to the viewing and listening public. Welcome to the Government House weekly press briefing for the week beginning Monday, September 30th. This afternoon, we have with us the Honorable Governor Albert Bryan Jr., and he will be sharing some words with the Virgin Islands public on some issues of importance. So without further delay, Governor Bryan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I don't usually come to these press briefings, but there are a couple of things in the news that I think I need to share with the public. The first one being, this is a very, very big week for WAPA. This week, WAPA goes before the PSC as well as the Senate. And in doing that, we know that for the last couple of weeks, it has been at the top of the news. There's been a lot of talk back and forth, the delegates' letter, or the response of the legislature, as well as Larry Kupfer, their CEO, going on the radio station. But I want to remind the people of the Virgin Islands that WAPA is a tremendous priority for us. From the inception of running and the hurricane money, that with the recovery money that was allotted, we wanted to make sure that if we were going to get this money, that we had a power company that could produce reliable and affordable power. WAPA affects all of us, and most importantly, it affects the going ins and out of our economy, our education system, our healthcare system, and our residents. For those of us that have grown up here, though, and continue to live here, and people who have come from afar and have been in the Virgin Islands for any significant amount of time knows that WAPA has been an issue for a very long time. I can remember as a child, even back to Unit 13 in St. Thomas in the 70s, that plagued our community with power outages. The good news is that WAPA has an unprecedented opportunity to really transform power generation and the way that we know power in the Virgin Islands. Is indicative of that is all the programs that we have been announcing. The completion of the project on Water Island with the poles, the announcement of 4 new generation units that are going to be added to WAPA's fleet through the RFP and the CDBG DR money, the addition of projects in Coral Bay and in Cruz Bay, which add power generation as well as battery backup for the island of St. John. The announcement last month of our net metering project that we continue to pursue with WAPA. All of these things complement $600 million of investment into our infrastructure for our energy, allowing WAPA to diversify their energy generation by not only having smaller units, but now looking to be able to have solar farms that would complement the power generation in a different way. We see the vision for WAPA for 10 years from now as being a renewable company. The Virgin Islands, just like any other Caribbean islands, have trouble generating reliable and affordable power throughout the years. The other thing is, I just keep saying it's nothing new to us. Granted, the recent spate of outages that we've had, especially on St. Thomas, is troubling and is frustrating. It frustrates me every time the power goes. But we think we found the problem. And since last week, working with Larry Kupfer, the New York Power Authority, we have been able to isolate one of the problems being linked to the supply of fuel for a generation unit. We fixed that unit, and even though we had power outages this weekend, there were scheduled power outages in order to do maintenance. We think we've got the main part of the problem solved now, so you can probably count on some more reliable power. However, there are still things that need to be fixed. We have other units, Unit 26 in St. Thomas, that is still undergoing repairs, and we still have some repairs to do in St. Croix. But for right now, I think we've got it to a point where we've stabilized it. When I stood before you in January in my first State of the Territory as governor, I told you there was a canyon of challenges between now and a bright future for WAPA. We are facing those challenges every day. And my job is to work with the public, the delegate, the legislature, and the federal partners in order to make sure that we have this power. Now, that can only be done collaboratively. Making aspersions and making negative comments towards WAPA, referencing things that have been done in the past that didn't turn out right, those things don't help the problem. As we move forward, I look forward to a relationship that will make WAPA, will allow WAPA to go to the bond market and take some of the debt that we have and be able to present it in a way that not only puts WAPA in a more solvent position, but provides a lower consumer rate to you. Now for the good news. Today is the last day of the Matt Potter budget. As we close out the fiscal year on September 30th, tomorrow begins the Brian Roach first administration budget. We're very happy to announce that as we close out the year, that we can say that for the first time in a very long time, we finished this year with no budget deficit. As a matter of fact, we may have even closed out the year with a slight surplus. We've paid out over $43 million in tax payments this year alone, this fiscal year alone. 14 of that, which was made before we came to office, and another 29, including the $5 million that was issued last week. This is the conversations we're not having in the Virgin Islands are the ones that I'm most proud of. We're not having conversations about how we pay our bills. We're not having conversations about how we lay off government employees, and we're not having conversations about how we shrink in order to compensate for lack of revenue. I'm happy to say that our revenues are up in the Virgin Islands and our outlook is bright. We've upticked at gross receipts alone by more than 20 or 30% over last year's earning. I would like to thank the 33rd Legislature for the approval of our budget. As your governor, I manage your money the way I manage mine. I had a very conservative budget. The one that we got from the legislature is $20 million more than what we proposed. But trust that we want to be conservative, because one thing that we want to do that we said from the beginning was to stabilize the government and restore the trust not only of the residents but the investors as well. And in doing so, we want to make sure that we pay our bills. That's why we continue to cut tax checks to the consumers. That's why we cut out $75 million worth of returns for the new fiscal year. The legislature, in their ultimate wisdom, sought to reduce that amount to $65 million for the fiscal year, which is not part of our plan, as we want to be able to be current this time next year in terms of paying people back of their taxes. The $10 million that was taken out was reserved to pay people over 65 who we owe retro to. We must pay our bills and complete. We cannot discriminate against one set of people over the next. So in paying so and paying our retro, we need to have an estimate, a correct estimate amount of how much we owe, and then we need to create a plan to pay it. It has always been our position when we created this budget to go in very conservatively because we have so many bills. Let's not forget the 8% that is still owed to the people of the Virgin Islands. And we still have outstanding vendor bills to be paid. We're in a position now where we have to have cash flow. We have a lot of projects pending, whether they're on the HUD side or the FEMA side, that we have to be able to create these projects and then get reimbursed. So we're really looking to be as conservative as possible to make sure that our residents and our bondholders alike know that we're dedicated to paying down our debt. The last thing I want to talk about today is that I know it's going to be hard moving forward for us to be responsible because there are a lot of pressures on the government and from all over to do things that might not be the most prudent. And when I talk about pressure, it's political pressure. This is an election year coming up. We're less than 1 year away from the primary. But we have changed course in terms of our approach to government and how we deal with our bills. We cannot let electioneering and election year spending get in the way of us pushing forward balanced budgets for the Virgin Islands. We cannot let it get in the way of making sound decisions, not for tomorrow, but for decades to come, about what is good for the Virgin Islands. We have the position now in the fire in order to start the process of consolidating the EMS and the fire service, which we think will bring a greater level of emergency service to our residents. I just wanted to say that I'm really proud today of the fact that, people will say, well, you're benefiting from what happened before. But we're managing in current day. We're managing the funds that will make it able for us to come out of this budget year at a surplus. We also are managing every day, working hard to get that money from FEMA. It is not allotted. We have to go out there and get that money obligated every single day by working with our federal partners and our partners here in the Virgin Islands to make sure that we recover and we recover quickly. Thank you for your time. I'll take any questions that the press may have. No questions? AJ Rao?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, AJ.
So there are many people in the community, including Congresswoman Plaskett, who've expressed doubts about, whether or not WAPA is salvageable based on it, given its financial deficiencies. You seem to be pretty optimistic about WAPA's future. And, obviously, Congresswoman Plaskett put out a statement saying that she thinks a state of emergency is called for. What do you think about that? And do you think WAPA is salvageable on its own without without an outside entity coming in and helping it?
And I'm glad you asked that, AJ. We have answered the delegate. We wrote her a letter responding to what she asserts is her position on WAPA. And unequivocally, I would say that we are able to keep WAPA solvent without any outside interest, without any type of restructuring in terms of bankruptcy or insolvency. We have dedicated ourselves to a plan that would allow us to come out of there. But every time someone from our elected official, from the elected officials makes a disparaging comments, we start over at ground zero again with the investors. We've had several investors come to the table, and every single time someone opens their mouth to make a disparaging comment about WAPA, we start over again. And that's making it more difficult, because if we don't get some of the debt that has high interest rates financed, we can't bring down the rates of the debt to you. So we're looking to, we got 3 different types of possibilities that we're doing in terms of the debt that'll put WAPA in a better place in terms of their cash position monthly, and long term, their rates going down for you.
And a second question.
Yeah.
This just an unrelated question. It's just in regard to the enforcement of the toxic sunscreen ban, which you signed into law last month. Today being September 30th is the first day that retailers are prohibited from placing new orders for these toxic sunscreen products. So obviously there's a big responsibility for Customs. I was wondering, has your administration had any discussions with Customs, with retailers, as far as these toxic sunscreen products coming back on the shelves?
Well, I'm not aware of any initial discussions, but I could check with my health commissioner to make, DLCA. I'm losing too many acronyms now. DLCA, to ensure that they have checked with Customs to stop that from coming in the territory.
And final question, I understand there's some work going on with Government House as far as construction work going on. Do we have any more details about what's going on with that?
Government House, the Battery in St. John, as you know, we have several structures associated with Government House. The Battery in St. John, we are about to do the evaluation on the bids to restore that structure by the end of the week. Government House, St. Thomas, we had pre-bid meeting for the contractors who are bidding on that project. We have to extend the bid closing date another couple of weeks because there were so many questions. And then Catherineburg is being hired by WICO, is being done by WICO. They're in the process of doing drawings now and assessing what exactly how it will be rebuilt.
Thank you.
So, good afternoon, guys.
Hey, Robert.
Talk a little bit more about WAPA. I'm just kind of curious. Given the rolling blackouts, given the mechanical problems that WAPA's had over the past couple of months, what is it that gives you such comfort, or at least that you feel so optimistic about WAPA?
So, I mean, everybody talks about me being optimistic. I'm generally an optimistic person. But the optimism behind WAPA, remember the rolling blackouts was not really something we foresaw. This is a temporary problem, somewhat caused by the addition of all these new equipment that we're putting into service. We just had 3 of the Wartsillas. I got to remember all the name of these generators. The Wartsillas that were put into service, and now we're adding another 4 once this RFP is complete. They're mixing those with Agrecos that we use in St. Croix, as well as some older GE units in St. Thomas. So getting those things to work together and work in a way that will keep the power constant is a challenge. The other thing is that we're trying to run the power as lean as possible because we want to make sure that the power doesn't trip. Before you came in, I mentioned the fact that the power outages that we've had in the last week have been scheduled outages for repairs. We think we've identified the major problem that was causing the tripping and causing the power to go out. We've tested those generators with the increased load, and they seem to be working for right now. We have some other issues that we need to fix, so it's not totally fixed as yet, but we feel a lot more confident. Why I feel confident about WAPA, we have never before had the type of money to be able to invest in the infrastructure of the utility without amassing more debt. This $600 million that we're of capital infusion allows us to upgrade our systems and create resiliency. Remember, this is not a problem that has started recently, nor is it a solution that has started recently. As far back as the DeYoung administration, there were measures being taken to upgrade and create smaller generating units so we wouldn't have that spinning reserve that was costing us all this extra LEAC money. Since that time, we put in the 3 Wartsillas, we've added the Agrecos, and now we're about to add 4 more generating units on St. Thomas. This is all towards that. During that time as well, we added Spanish Town as far as the solar, and we added Dunu in terms of going toward a renewable. If we had continued on that plan, by now we would have had the wind generation out by the landfill here in Bovoni, and we would have also had another solar facility added. Those initiatives were stopped. We're starting to do that again. We're hoping to add 2 new solar facilities to WAPA to create that resiliency and affordability. The other thing is we wouldn't have had the opportunity in St. John either, where now we have the battery systems being added as well as the generation units. So when people ask me why I feel optimistic about WAPA, is because I bought into their plan. As you see, for the first time in almost a decade or more, we paid off our bill completely. There's an ad running in the paper every single day talking about how the government is making you pay late fees. WAPA owes us money. So we're going to stick to our commitment in doing that. I think when we're chastising WAPA, people seem to forget that WAPA went through 2 Category 5 storms too. WAPA kept the current on for over a year and didn't have its bills go out. It didn't lay off a single person. All of those things contribute to the situation we have now. Even when you look at the instability of the organization that has plagued it, and people talk about it being able to be more solvent, you have to look at the fact too that over a year now we're waiting for a rate increase from the PSC. The length of time it takes, WAPA is incurring debt. This is not a debt of WAPA. This is a debt of the Virgin Islands people like you and I who eventually have to pay that. So we can complain and complain and complain, but unless we attack the problem with a plan like what we have, which I'm sure Larry will be sharing with the legislature when he goes before them this week, then we end up paying anyway. We stick to our plan. With smaller generation units, we increase the resiliency, we refinance the high interest debt, and we continue towards renewables, and we'll be all right. It's not easy. It's not tomorrow it's going to change, but we have a plan that we invest in. Simply declaring states of emergency does nothing to solve the problem. And I dare say, I challenge anybody to show me how declaring a state of emergency for energy is going to help anything happen any quicker. In the delegate's letter, she mentions relationships with the Department of Energy. We have relationships with the Department of Energy. It's the Department of Energy that helped us to help create the net metering program that we launched earlier this month. I've been to Washington 4 times since I've been elected. Every time I go and I'm lobbying, and we're paying lobbyists a good bit of money to lobby about the 10% waiver for FEMA. All these things are things that we're doing and we're actively working on, trying to make sure that we give the power company the utility, the support it needs, and that we're able to get the rates down. So I know it's frustrating. It frustrates me too, especially when it goes off during the football game, but we're going to get it together.
Do you have any messages for the legislature as they meet tomorrow?
Well, you know, I've been speaking to the senators individually, and I think they understand too, but, you know, they're frustrated. You know, their constituents call them daily complaining about the problems of the power going on, whether it's affecting their business or their ability and their quality of life. So I told them in every conversation, ask the tough questions, ask the questions that need to be asked, but please don't make disparaging comments that are baseless about corruption or mismanagement unless you have proof. And then the other thing moving forward, if you're going to bring them into the legislature, let's have some constructive legislation and policy changes that is going to allow WAPA to do better. But just inviting them for a beating doesn't solve the problem. No other questions? Well, thank you very much.